Alright, this is OBX Hatman. So, we're going to talk about my Bronco here and the air compressor. Took quite a bit of time to figure this out, so I'll go through this one piece at a time and we'll go underneath and start probably there and go out. But first I'd like to talk about the air compressor. ARB dual system. This is the main harness, you know, coming from the air compressor. Well, two air compressors, and this feeds through this, comes under here, goes all the way across in the harness up to the battery, and then there's two fuses right here. I think they're both 40 amp apiece. The air compressor can do a max of 60 amps at full load. I ended up using Blue Rhino 1/4 inch air line. I believe it has a working limit of 300 psi. Being that this is an air compressor that does 150 continuous, I didn't see a need to, when I put my blow-off valve on here, I didn't see a need to go over 150. Not going to inflate anything past about 38 to 40 psi at the most. So this is a 150 air blow-off valve that I can bleed the line with if I need to in an emergency situation. These are all 1/4 inch fittings, pipe fittings for air. They're like beveled, so they seal when you tighten them, and you also use thread tape on them. I got crimps being used. I bought these off of Amazon. It's just whatever Chinese brand of crimps for airlines. Nothing special. Don't have a name. There's like a crimping tool, and you slide it over the hose, push the hose onto the nipple, and then turn around and slide this up, and you crimp it on. You don't want to crimp it so far that you collapse the line, obviously, but you would crimp it till you get a good feel for it. And of course, after you get done crimping all your lines, you want to test to see if you have any leaks anywhere at any of the crimp points. So one good way of doing that is the same way they test for leaks on tires, is you mix up just like a soapy solution of Dawn liquid with some water in a spray bottle, and you spray it on all your fitting areas. Once you got the pressure built up in the lines, you can put like 35-40 pounds PSI in there, and spray all your fittings and see if you got any bubbles popping up anywhere. I did not have any, so we got a sealed system. And that is another thing, it is a sealed system. It is not an always open system, it isn't always closed. And I'll talk more on that later. This is going to be kind of an extensive video, but I want to make sure I try and hit all the points that people have been asking me about, specifically how the airlines are ran under the Bronco. What this allows me to do is it allows me to inflate all 4 tires at one time, and then I monitor the TPMS sensors inside the Bronco, and when I get roughly to the PSI that I wish to have, I shut off the air compressor and then I unhook my airlines. The air compressor comes with a lot of different things, but I actually only use just the main harness for power to the compressors. And then I used this plug here, which supplies a signal, trigger signal, to turn on the compressors. And you'll see this in the harness. There's also a diode in line with this. Now, diodes only allow electricity to flow one direction, so you have to make sure that you got your diode. You can cut it out of the harness and put it back in line so that your harness is shorter and doesn't run so far, or have to run so far. But you can put your diode in line and make sure that the current's going the right direction. And I guess the best way to do that is you could just hook an LED or something like that to one side of the diode and then feed it power from a 12-volt source. If the light cuts on, you know the direction of flow. If it doesn't, then you just switch it, and then that's the way you'd want power to flow to the compressor, to trigger that circuit to cut on the compressors. The trigger wire for that runs up here to my switch assembly by aux beam, and it's one of these here that there's another line that aux beam has in their kit that runs all through these harnesses that I made, that goes all the way up through the firewall into the cab, up into the sunglass holder area, and that's where I keep my switch, my aux beam switch. So that's how I turn it on and off. The other portion of this, if you notice, there is a blue air hose coming up on this side. This bracket I made with some aluminum flat bar, twisted it, got it positioned the way I wanted it, and anchored it down. This is a stainless steel solenoid. Just a stainless steel ball in there. You energize the circuit for it. It's a simple circuit, positive, negative, and you just wire that. I wired that over to the aux beam switch as well, so when I cut that on, it deflates the tires at a slow rate, all 4 tires at once. And what this is used for is if I either want to deflate somebody else, or if I want to deflate my own tires at a slow rate. And I have another way of deflation that's quicker, but I put this in as sort of a emergency use for other people, or if I wanted to use it myself and I didn't care about waiting forever for the tires to deflate. So it's triggered also by, you know, the aux beam switch panel. Cut it on. The energized circuit allows the magnet to pick the ball up, and then it opens the airway, and then air just flows out. All right, so now that we got this all discussed, we're going to go underneath the Bronco. All right, so as you can see, there's a whole lot going on there. Now, this is a 7-port NPT distribution block. I forget the company it's made by. I want to say it's McPherson or something like that. I'll look it up and put a link to it in the video. So it's a 7-port, and then there's 2, like an inbound and an outbound port on the sides. That's a different thread. Those are 1/4 inch, and the brass 45-degree fittings there, I believe, are 1/8 inch, but they come out to a 1/4 inch nipple. So how this is all ran: so the air compressor, it comes in to this center port. Then the 2 rear tires are these 2. The 2 front tires are these 2. One of these 2 lines that are beside the air compressor, one of them goes up to the deflate solenoid. The other line goes inside the cab to where I can access it so somebody else can get fed air out, either by inflating or deflating. Now, here's the important part of this. You notice I got all this stuff coiled up here and bundled up with zip ties. So the location of the mount of this is on the gas tank, not attached to the gas tank. There is a plastic shield that the Bronco has around its gas tank, and what I did is I put a piece of metal behind it. I went up behind and dropped a piece of metal in between here. I think it was like 1/8 inch, like sheet steel or something like that. I put that back behind here, and I wanted to angle this slightly to give it some sort of like direction of where the airlines would go to the front, because most of them are going to the front. So I angled it upward slightly, and then I laid that piece of metal behind there so I wouldn't punch through my gas tank. Then I took a bit that was wide enough for the zip ties to go through, and I drilled upper and lower holes in 4 different locations, so 8 holes total. That allowed me to position this in pretty much the centermost point of the Bronco. Now, the reason I wanted the centermost point is so that all my lines would be as close to having to be the same distance as possible out to the 4 corners. So these two rear lines and these two front lines, they're not the same distance. There's a reason for that. In a closed system where you have all 4 tires being fed to a single distribution block, it is absolutely imperative that you make sure that the second line coming in on these is exactly that much, the distance between here and here, difference in length, because it'll take slightly a little bit more pounds per square inch to inflate one tire than another if you have them at the same length. So once I mounted this block, the first thing to find out was how long my longest line was going to be. Once I figured that out, then I worked the next 3 lines, and I cut them all to the same length except for the 2 longer lines that were going to be this much longer than the outside lines. I made them that much longer. So that's why some of this stuff is bundled up and wrapped up here, is because they're the shorter lines that had to be coiled up and bundled up. They're still the same length as the other 3 lines, or all 4 lines are the same length, except for, well, 2 are the same length and the other 2 are also the same length. These 2 outside ones are the shortest by this much difference. And that'll make the PSI be the same, because the air compressor feeds the center of the block. So the air has to go all the way to here to go out to this line, and it only has to go from here to get out to this line. So that's why you want to have that difference. What you'll end up with if you don't do that is you'll end up with one tire that'll be like a half a PSI or 1 PSI lower than the other once you start, you know, filling them up to like 38 PSI. One of them will read like 37, or it'll read 39. You know, it won't be exactly where you want it to be. This way it keeps it all nice and even. Now, how I ran the lines from here. So I have 5 lines going up to the front, and I have them bundled up. I have 1 line going to the front left. I also have the one going inside that I would feed to people going to the front left area. Then I have 1 line going to the front right, and then another line going up to the air compressor. And the 3rd line goes up to inside the cab, and 1 to the deflate solenoid also this way. So I got 3 lines going this way over to the left. And I'll show you how they run. I zip tied them to the crossbar there. Ran them up, and I go through these holes in the chassis with the lines. They're pretty durable, really durable lines. And this bundle of 3 is probably the most, it's the biggest bundle of all of them. So that comes through that hole underneath your brake lines. Zip tied it to the wiring harness. And then I continue these 2 lines, which one of them, like I said, goes to where I can feed people air from inside the cab. The other one goes to the deflate solenoid. Then that goes up like this. Fastens also to the wiring harness. Goes up. Zip tied it there. On top, don't zip tie next to sharp metal, because from vibrations and stuff it'll cut your air lines. And then from there it goes up and into the firewall. One goes to the deflate solenoid, and the other one goes into the firewall. Now back this way, this front left line, it comes down, and I kind of curved it up inside of this bracket that mounts my rails on the side, and then I put a zip tie behind it. I don't know if you can see that. Zip tie behind it, and then it comes down with a short little pigtail out to a 90 degree. And what I want to do when I use these is I undo the Velcro. These are some little straps I got. Undo the Velcro, and that drops down the coupler. These are hydraulic caps, usually used for hydraulic lines. I'll put a link to the ones I bought that fit over top of these couplers. And then, let's see, pull this cap off, and there's your coupler. Now these couplers, they are stainless steel couplers, and they're not cheap. They're like $45 a piece. But they're 100% stainless steel through and through, and this Bronco is being built to handle salt environment out in OBX. I did have brass ones from one of the big companies that make air stuff. This here is made by Dixon, and like I said, very expensive, very good quality though, stainless steel through and through. The other company's brass one, it was brass for almost every single component except for the lock ring inside that locks the air hose on. That was a big problem for me because I went to show somebody how it all worked, and I had a very difficult time actually sliding this back to get it to lock onto the air hose because of the rust that had happened from the steel lock ring they used inside. So I immediately decided to change those out to stainless steel, hence why we have what we have now. Now, you might say, well, why didn't you go up to the front of the bumper? Obviously, getting near all of that linkage and everything, that was just a bad idea. I was thinking about doing that, but then my air hoses would be longer, more difficult to run, more things to look out for, and I just didn't want to really get into all of that. So I figured the best place was to go up by the rails, and I'm sure any aftermarket rail systems that attach in the same sort of fashion, you could figure out some way to just give yourself just enough length so you could drop it down and have a place to hook up your air hose. Going back under here, so the other line that goes up to the front is this one here, and there's another line that runs beside it which goes to the rear right side, and that goes through that hole by the gas tank. Good, you can see that. And that chassis hole right there, run the two lines through there, come across, and you got pretty much the same thing going on with the front right tire. And then there's an additional line that follows sort of the same path as the other side and fastens, and then it goes up to the air compressor, and it's zip tied off, you know, wherever I felt there needed to be a zip tie to keep it from flopping around, just to keep from any serious things happening. The other line is actually across and on top of the gas tank. I don't know if you can see that because I can't see the camera, but it runs across the gas tank and then it down, and then it goes back to the back right rearmost mounting point of the rail. Same situation, same couplers. Truck going by. Same design and same length. Then we go back on the other side. And now you have these two lines that go to the rear. Now these two lines, one of them got coiled up and it runs. Okay, so continuing on, I have to switch the batteries out. So this line here runs up and over the drive shaft, but if you look, it actually goes up over the housing that the drive shaft is inside, so it doesn't, you know, get near the drive shaft at all. This is the only hose that really concerned me because it is near a moving part. but I ran it up over top of that and ran it back behind, and then zip tied it down to where it should not move and get near the drive shaft. Now I put probably, I don't know, probably 1,000 miles on this, and since I put this in, and I've had zero issues. Nothing really moves. This line also gets kind of close to the exhaust, but it's not, it's about 2.5 inches or so, 2 inches from the exhaust, but it's fine. I've got it zip tied, and it's, you know, it would have to flop quite a bit in order to get it to go there. And I can pull it back and make it even tighter if I want. I just don't want to make it too tight against this edge here, because I don't want it to get abrased, cut in two. And that runs along there through a chassis hole to the other side, and of course the same thing there. Attach it to the rear, and that's how I got all that stuff fastened. Hopefully you can see that. And those are just 90-degree brass 1/4 inch air fittings. Now you might be saying to yourself, well, why in the world would you do all that? Well, it does make it easier, because now instead of, I know there's some companies that make 4-ways and stuff like that. So my 4 little air lines, I got 2 on the back of that seat and 2 on the back of that seat. Those are little hangers that you usually use in cars for hanging clothes on the back, stuff like that. So I bought some straps with some little D-rings on them, ran the hose through them, got them fastened with some zip ties on the one side of them so I could wrap them up, and then I just hang them on those little hangers, and they're kind of out of the way. Now, I'll tell you what the hose looks like, because I'm sure some of you are probably wondering what this is on this hose. So what these are, and these are all exactly, once again, the same length. And this is how those are zip tied in. Didn't really have a good method of fastening these down, so, you know, zip ties work in a pinch. And this is your standard air male air end that'll fit to the couplers. And then on the other side, I have what is called a lock inflate, and this is what locks onto the valve stem, seals, and then I hit the air compressor and it starts filling up. What this is a clamp system. Okay, when you press this down, those teeth come out, and they have they're machined with like threads inside the teeth. I don't know how much of that you can see. And then when you let go, it locks onto the valve stem and seals it. And there's an O-ring inside there too. It keeps all that sealed. Pretty good. Nice little, nifty little things. And they're not cheap either. They're pretty expensive. And these are closed flow design, 1/4 inch MPT. So let's talk about that. Closed flow versus open. So right now, with nothing attached, it is a closed flow system. So I can go in there, turn on the air compressor, and I could let it go up to 150 psi, and this valve will turn on or open and it'll start releasing air. Because it is a closed system in that it does not let the air out. Now, the hose that I've got that I feed to people, it's about a 30 or 40 foot hose, and it has an always open end on it made by Jayco, and you can get these on Amazon, and these are always open. So why did I do an always open end on this closed system that I have? Well, a couple reasons. If it was to be a closed system or a closed end on this, then I would have to sit in the cab and wait for somebody to check their air and inflate or deflate their tires, and I'd have to cut the compressor on and cut it off all the time until they got what they needed for their air. This way, when I hook this end up underneath the steering column and I cut the compressor on, air will just flow out of this, just like your standard air supply place at your local gas station or whatever. You know, you put the quarters in there and it just starts flowing air out the nozzle. You attach it to the tire, it seals, and it starts filling up with air. So this is the same sort of design. So I can cut the compressor on and I could just continue doing whatever I'm doing until they say they're done. And then when they say they're done, I just cut my compressor off, unhook the hose, go ahead and open the valve for the deflate, and then that'll release whatever air may be trapped inside the lines, and that's a done deal. This is what I've got for giving to people to check their air, and it has a Jayco on one end, and this is the end that it reads from. And then if they need to drop their air, the PSI a little bit, they can squeeze that handle and it'll release the air out of this side. Now, this went through a couple different renditions. The first time I did this, I wanted to be able to use it to see my own air and what my PSI was of the whole system. And that turned out not being such a good idea, because it only reads air coming from this direction. So on this end, I had to have that type of fitting, and then put that there, and then it makes it still a closed system unless you push the trigger down. So if I go to feed somebody air and I want to see what their PSI is, to tell them, you know, to shut it off and regulate it for them, more of a micromanagement thing, which I didn't want to have to worry about, then I would have to attach it from this side. And if I attach it from this side, oh, I do got to figure out a better way to get this sort of up in here. And these are the brass ones, but you see that little silver piece there, the lock ring? Yeah, that thing rusted up bad on all 40 other ones, but on the inside of the cab it should be fine. So hooking it up this way so I could read their air coming through, and I could cut the compressor on and off and regulate it for them, it was just kind of stupid. It's like, why am I doing the work for them? Let them do their own work. I'll supply them the air for free, and then they can do whatever they need to do to get their airs right on all 4 tires. So anyhow, yeah, it was just not worth it to do that. So that's why I went with an open system from this point out. That way I can just cut it on, let them do whatever they need to do. They can check their tires with this, and when they get their shit done, hey, I'm good. There you go. And that's pretty much the whole system. I don't think there's anything else I missed. And here is where the switch is. And the air compressor's on this button, and then I've got lower for the deflate. There's no real deflate symbol they have for these stickers, so that's what it is. Like I said, the biggest thing is to make sure that your lines are all equal distance out to the tires. I guess I could show you one aspect of something else that I bought. so that I would not have to deflate and watch my tires slowly go down. And what this will do is it'll make it so that I can immediately dump my air and then go on the beach. That's what this is all built around, is being a beach vehicle. Not a rock crawler, just a beach vehicle. So the next thing I've got to make my job a little bit easier maintaining this is the valve stems. Those are Apex valve stems. These are the XLs, I believe they call them. And you undo this cap, and I will do this for one tire just to show you how fast it is. You pull this tab, and there's 4 ports on the back side of this tab that open up and blow the air out. So it bypasses all of this up front. Your standard bleed valve, it bypasses all of that. So I can go from 38 psi, 36 psi, down to like 15 inside of about 20 seconds. Now, if I was to wait and count off for each tire, that would take me about 1.5 minutes or so, roughly, to do all 4 tires and get back on the beach. However, the process for me is going to be to pop this one and start counting in my head and walk around systematically, pop that one, pop this one, pop this one, and then when I get back here and I reach 20, if I can do all 4 in 20 seconds after I've got the caps off, then when I reach 20, close this one, go around, take the same time to walk around and close each one of them that it took for me to open each one of them, and then they all should be at roughly the same PSI. So I should be able to technically do this in about 25 to 30 seconds, all 4 tires from 38 to 36 PSI down to like 15. So I'll get out the tester just to show you, and there's plenty of videos on this too. It's not like I'm doing anything that's magical here. So right now I'm running 35.4. Okay, so we'll just do a count till like 20 and we'll see where we're at. Here we go. Hold on. 17,000, 18,000, 9,000, 10, 12, 1,000, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Shut it off. And now I'm at 9. So on the beach, I might have to be a little bit faster. But yeah, pretty cool. Very fast. So if I get walking around doing all 4 tires and I do it in about 15 seconds, I'll probably be around 15 PSI. I actually went a few pounds under that. But anyhow, you get the idea. That's my quick release. So I can just dump all 4, get on the beach, and be gone in like a minute and a half maybe. And that is all of the air compressor components, lines, couplers. I'll put links to everything that I can. Stuff that I remember, the McPherson distribution block. I think it's McPherson, or it might be McDormand's or something like that. But I'll look it up in my emails and figure out all the different parts and put a link for everybody. But this is OBX Hat Man. I appreciate everybody watching the video, and hopefully this will inspire somebody to do the same thing to their Bronco. It makes for a much easier time to off-road. Y'all have a good day. Thank you.